Okay, we talked about this last time. Income stock and the growth stock. It's kind of opposing concept. Income stock, income stock has what? High dividend payout ratio, right? High dividend payout ratio. So that means low retention rate, right? But growth stock has high retention rate, so lower dividend payout ratio. And income stock focus on current income. And growth stock focus on future growth of earnings. Ultimately, price change, price increase, capital gain. So that's what this stock focus on, price increase, rather than current income, right? So example of income stock, you said established companies or stocks, GE or utility stocks, Con Edison. And example of growth stock is most technology stocks. So dividend versus growth, which one is better? Dividend is better, or the growth in earning is better? Growth stock is better. Very important points. And first, remember, dividends are paid out of what? Dividend comes from what? So, as we actually said, the bottom of the income statement, net income minus dividend equals retained earnings, right? And net income divided by number of stock outstanding, that's EPS, right? So EPS, part of the money goes to dividend, and the remaining amount goes to retained earnings, or future investment. So dividends are paid out of earnings, right? Earnings, net income. In accounting, income, profits, earnings are the same thing, right? Earnings, profits, income, same thing. Or dividends are earnings, right? Dividends come from earnings. So that means higher profit, higher EPS, higher the dividends. Higher profit, higher dividends. What's the dividends? Definition of dividends. What's the definition of retained earnings? What's the dividends? Earnings that distributed. Simply speaking, earnings that distributed to owners. What's the retained earning? Earnings have not been distributed, but retained for future investment. Same earnings. Those two components actually came from earnings, profits. So one is distributed, the other one is not distributed, but retained for future investment. Okay, so growth in earnings requires growth in income, earnings, right? In this, I like this term better in this case. Earnings, profits, income, same thing. Growth in dividends requires growth in earnings. And earning growth occurs primarily because what? This future growth of earnings. Why they retain? What's the definition purpose of retained earnings? Why they not distribute but retain? For future investment, right? So when company has investment opportunity, good investment opportunity, you're going to use that money. So last time we said what? What's the three among those three financing sources? Which one is the best? Retained earning, debt, or stock? Which one is the lowest cost of capital. So, retained earnings, no cost. When you start your business, which money you going to use? Your own money you made before from your salary or previous business, that profit, or you borrow money from bank, or you have another partners who issue stocks. So your own money, right? That's the lowest cost. You may think of opportunity cost, but still the lowest cost compared to others' money. Right? Others, the partners' money or the bank's money. So this is the best source of financing. Right? The earning growth occurs primarily because when you have a good investment opportunity, you retain money rather than pay out to owners. So retain earnings rather than payout. So the higher the percentage of retained earning, that means what? Percentage of dividend payout ratio and the retention ratio, right? So we are talking about this ratio, right? Higher the percentage of retained earning, that means retention rate rather than payout. Dividend payout ratio. So retention rate. So the higher the retention rate, the higher the growth rate of earnings. So we could say growth rate of earnings and the growth rate of dividend, same thing. Because dividend comes from earnings. So when we say dividend, growth rate of dividend, that's the same as growth rate of earnings, same thing. More specifically, what's the constant growth model of stock valuation? What's the constant growth model of stock valuation? Numerator and denominator. What's the numerator? The D sub 1, right? The dividend you expect to receive next period, next year. And what's the numerator? R minus G, right? What's the R? Rate of return, required rate of return, or we could say cost of capital, discount rate. So in this case, equity cost of capital rather than debt capital. We are talking about equity, right? Stock. So cost of equity capital. And we assume no debt. Right? So your financing source is only stock, not debt. So this R is cost of equity capital. Yeah, what's the G? Yeah, growth rate of dividend. Same as the growth rate of earnings, same thing. Examples 7.3, two scenarios. So one is called old scenario in the textbook. Old scenario or original policy. Yeah, this textbook says current policy, and the new policy. Current policy, the first scenario is what? Your EPS, earning per share is $6. And the discount rate is 10%, cost of capital is 10%, cost of equity capital is 10%, and dividend payout ratio is 100%. So they actually pay out all the profits to investors, owners, 100%. What's the stock price? And the second scenario you could choose is dividend. They reduce dividends, so dividend payout ratio is 75% rather than 100%. That means your retention rate is 25%, right? You retain 25% of the earnings for the future investments. So what does that mean? Why they retain earnings for future investment? Growth in dividend requires growth in earnings. Earning growth occurs because you retain money for future investment. So the higher the retention rate is, higher the growth rate. So that means we can calculate growth rate. Growth rate. How to calculate growth rate? Usually I talk about, I show actually how to drive growth rate, but I'm going to introduce just formula. I don't want to actually keep boring, sleepy. Growth rate equals return on equity times retention rate. This is the formula, very important formula, retention rate. So you need to remember this formula. How to calculate this growth rate? You need to know these two information. What's the return on equity? Return on investment. When you invest $100, how much you get return? Maybe $10. Yeah, your investment is $100. You get $10 back. Then how much is the return on investment? 10%, right? So when you invest your equity, when you invest in stock, $100, if you receive $10, return on equity is same 10%, right? Return on equity. Return on investment, same thing. But in this textbook, our return on equity is textbook assume 12%. Is that correct?
Yeah.
12%? Yeah, 12%. Yeah, let's assume your company's return on equity is 12%. So if you invest $100, you can receive $12. So 12%. And what's the retention rate here? 25%. Okay. So 12% times 25%. What's the growth rate?
3%.
3%? Okay, thank you. Now we can calculate. Yeah, let's calculate this first. First scenario. If you pay out 100% of your profits, what's the numerator? Dividends?
$6.
Yeah, $6. You expect to receive $6 in 1 year. $6. Dividend 1. That's this of 1. What's the R? 10%. And what's the growth rate? 0, right? Because we don't actually retain earnings for future investment. Growth rate is 0 in this case. So you can calculate this. How much? The value of stock, $6. $60. What is this? What kind of cash flow we are talking about in this case? What kind of cash flow? Why we use this formula? Your dividend is what? No growth. No growth. Do you remember this picture last time? No growth. So pay $6 forever. Your company pays dividend $6 forever. No growth. Dividend is not growing. Perpetuity. Just regular perpetuity, not growing perpetuity, right? But now, dividend is growing. Yeah, dividend is growing at 3%, like this, 3%. So next, in this case, $6 is actually this of 1. D sub 1 in this case. D sub 1 is, if D sub 1 is $6, what's the D sub 2? 2 years from now. This D is what you expect to receive in 1 year, at the end of this year. This D sub 1 is what the dividend, amount of dividend you expect to receive at the end of this year or during this year. What about D sub 2? How to calculate D sub 2?
D1 times 1 plus G. D1.
Yeah,
$6
$6,
times
1 plus
G.
G. In this case, 1.03, right? 3%. So how much is that? $6 times 1.03, right? So $6 and some cents. So just same as we practiced last time. And we can calculate D sub 3 and so on. But in this case, our EPS is $6. And dividend payout ratio is 75%. 75%. What's the dividend? How much you expect to receive at the end of the year? How to calculate that?
$6. It's EPS.
Yeah, D sub 1. How much is the dividend you expect to receive? If EPS today is $6. What's it?
6 times 0.75. $6 times 75%.
0.75, right? 0.75. EPS times 0.75, which is
$4.50.
$4.50?
Yeah.
Okay, $4.50. Thank you. So D sub 1 is $4.50. And what's R? Same as before. And what's the growth rate? 0.3. So if you calculate this, this is growing perpetually. Growing perpetually. Yeah, you're gonna receive this kind of cash flows. You're gonna get this kind of cash flows rather than these cash flows. So present value of what is continuing growing perpetuity is bigger than this, right? Bigger than this. So how much? 60 or 28? 29. Thank you. 29. So that means what? Present value of growing perpetuity is 64 and 29. Yeah. This present value of this normal perpetuity is $60. It's so basic but fundamental foundation.
Professor,
Yes.
can you go over this P0 over here? Because in the textbook it says something different.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. In the textbook they put $6 over $60. And then they added the percent with 0 and they got 0.10. Oh, wait, never mind.
Just plug in, right? D sub 1. D sub 1 is going to be $6. And just R, because no growth,
Right.
no growth. So G is 0. So $6 divided by 10%. That's it. So income stock and the growth stock. Growth stock expect 20% future growth of earnings and capital gain, price increase. Older people may expect this kind of cash flow. Old people. Well, younger people actually tend to invest in growth stocks because they are young. So even if you lose, you have enough time to recover. But they don't have actually enough time to recover. They need actually fixed riskless income, fixed income. Okay, look at this. Cost of capital is the same. Cost of equity capital is the same, 10%. But look at this. Return on equity. When you invest $100, you can receive only $8. In this case, $12. And what's the difference? What's the difference here? This information and this information. This information.
Return on equity.
Yes. Yes. In the previous case, return on equity is higher than discount rate or equity cost of capital. In this case, return on equity is lower than cost of capital. In this case,
No return on equity is off.
Huh?
So your return on equity was your off.
Return on equity is 12%, previous case, right? But the question, example 7.4, we assume this company has 4 return on equity. Yeah. Example 7.4. Oh, what's the growth rate in this case? Previous case, 12% times 25%.
So it's 8%
Now,
times 25.
this case, 8% times
0.25.
growth rate 25%. Retention rate is same. We assume retention rate is same. That is
0.00.
2%.
Yeah.
2%. 2%. So piece of 0, R minus G. So this one is same as the previous case, 450. And then 10% minus only 2%. Yeah, before 3%. But now 2%. How much?
56.25.
56.25. Yes. 56.25, which is lower than this case. Lower than this case. So this condition is very important. This condition, we need to closely look at these two information: cost of capital and return on equity. So when the discount rate is higher than return on equity, when cost of capital is lower than return on equity, your stock actually reduce shareholders' value. As you can see, it reduce shareholders' value. Maximize shareholders' value is what? Goal of corporation, goal of financial managers, goal of financial managers, right? Increase shareholders' value, add value. Later on, from chapters 8 and 9, we're going to talk about NPV method, NPV, negative NPV. rather than positive NPV. So positive NPV leads to increase in shareholder value. But in this case, this kind of case, produce what negative NPV. So negative NPV actually reduce shareholders' value. That's what we're going to talk about next time. Next chapter, chapter 8 and 9. NPV, net present value. So when you invest in any projects, when you invest in a project, your present value of future cash flow will be lower than your investments. So that's the negative NPV. So if you have negative NPV, you're going to choose that investment project or not? No, that's what we're going to talk about. Chapter 8 and 9. So very important, NPV. Reduce shareholders' value and the negative NPV. But so far we talked about the other case, right? Increased shareholders' value and have positive and net present value. So example 7.4 is opposite case, worst case. Okay, the last example in the dividend discount model. It's very tricky, and many students can actually didn't answer correctly this question. You know what I'm saying? A little bit tricky question. Please look at this, the last example of dividend discount model. Example 7.5. And a relatively tough question in your My Finance Lab quiz, homework or quiz. This same similar to this example. Okay? So if you have any difficulty when you do your My Finance Lab, practice the example one more time. So if you still have difficulty, then try one more time. So if you completely understand, you can answer to that question. How many of you have this handout or textbook? Handout. Who has good voice? Do you have? Can you read first or two sentences?
It's the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing. So please speak loudly. Yeah. Can you stand up, please? Stand up.
No, it's okay.
You got this. If you have textbook, please read.
Small fry.
Yes.
Small fry has just invented a potato chip that looks and tastes like a French fry. Given the phenomenal market response to this product, Small Fry is reinvesting all of its earnings to expand its operations. Earnings were $2 per share this past year and are expected to grow at a rate of 20% per year until the end of year 4. At that point, other companies are likely to bring out competing products. Analysts project that at the end of year 4, Small Fry will cut its investment and begin paying 6% of its earnings as dividends. This growth will also slow to a long run rate of 4%. If Small Fry's equity cost of capital is 8%, what is the value share today?
Okay. Thank you very much.
So,
Yeah. This case is actually what? We talked about this case and this case, right? Yeah. You remember this picture, right? Yeah. So far we talked about this picture. So now this example actually talking about this case. Okay. So this is constant growth model. This one is what? Non-constant. This one is normal, normal growth. This is non-normal growth, abnormal growth. So abnormal and normal, two components. Two components. So this is a non-constant. So abnormal. So two regions until we can divide into two periods. One is until the end of year 4, and the second is until the end of year 4, and then at the end of year 4, and after year 4. Until the end of year 4, your earning growth, what?
0.
The earning growth rate. Yeah, you need to actually think separately. Earning growth and dividend growth. Earning growth rate is 20% until the end of year 4. Earning is growing at 20% per year until the end of year 4. And then after year 4, the earning growth slow. Slow to what? A long run constant rate. Of what percent?
4%.
4%. Okay, very good. So first 4 years, 20% each year. So this is actually 4 year. First 4 year. First 4 year. First 4 years, earning is growing at this rate, 20%. And at the end of the 4th year, earning is growing slowly to a long run constant rate of 4%, just like this constant growth rate. That's the information about earnings. Yeah, what about dividends? They don't pay actually dividend first 3 years. So I'm gonna make a different timeline. 1, 2, 3, 4. Year 1, and year 2, year 3, year 4, and continue. Yeah, this information is given, right? What's the current EPS? How much is the current EPS?
$2.
$2. Yeah, thank you. current EPS, E sub 0. Yeah, what's the E sub 1?
240.
240. 240. How did you get that?
It's in that.
E sub 0 times 1.02.
2.
Yeah, 1.02.
No, 1.2.
Oh, 1.2. Oh, yeah, 20%. Right, thank you. 1.2. 20%. So abnormal growth. Abnormal growth, not just 4 or 5%, 20%. So 240.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.2, yes. EPS 0, EPS sub 0 times 1.2. How did you get E sub 2? How can we get E sub 2?
2 times.
E sub 1, E sub 1 times 1.2, right? Yeah, E sub 1, which is 240. 240 times 1.2. How much? 388?
288.
Oh, 288. 288. Yeah, the concept, if you understand the concept, it's not, calculation is not that complicated. Just public school math, right? If you understand the concept. Yeah, we don't use actually calculus, just multiply, that's all. What's the E sub 3? Same thing, right? E sub 2 times 1.2. So how much is that? 3 something?
346.
346. 346. It says what? Until the end of year 4, right?
Right.
Until the end of year 4. So we can calculate, we need to calculate E sub 4.
He said 3.
E sub 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 346
Yeah.
times.
How much is that?
$4.15.
50 cents.
15.
Oh, 15. Okay. 415. So what about, let's talk about the information on dividend. Do they pay dividend for first 3 years?
No.
No. So this of 0, this of 1 equals 0, this of 2 equals 0, and this of 3 also equals 0. This of 1, this of 2, and this of 3. What about this of 4?
Minus 0.6.
This of 4.
Yes, they start doing the.
He said 4 times 0.6.
This of 4. This of 4 equals what percent? What's the payout ratio?
60%.
60%. So 60% of this, right? Yeah, 60% of E4. 60%. So how much is that?
249.
249. That's ESO 4. And question is what? What's the stock price at what point in time?
Today.
We need to calculate. I think they asked a certain. Ultimate question is this: stock price today. So far, we calculate actually this portion. This portion. There are two components, two periods. So abnormal periods and the normal periods. For normal periods, why this is normal period?
Constant.
What's the input? Constant. Very good. Constant rate. Long run constant rate. Constant rate. Yeah. Earning growth has constant growth, constant rate of 4%. So that means our cash flow is the perpetuity, right? But not just not no growth, but constant growth, right? So we need growing perpetuity, right? Growing perpetuity. So for growing perpetuity, we need to use what formula? Constant growth model. Constant growth model. we can use constant growth model at what point in time? At this year 4, right? Year 4. Year 4. Year 4 or year 3? Year 3 or at the end of year 3 or at the end of year 4?
Year 4.
I think we can calculate the price at the end of year 3.
Why?
I think that's the question. The question actually, this example asked, what's the price at the end of year 3?
Oh, the question is the price of Judy and Greek.
So I need to write like here, here, piece of 3. And the dividend, they don't pay actually dividend for the first 3 years, but they pay after that. So we can calculate at the end of year 3. We can calculate price at the end of year 3. How to calculate the price at the end of year 3? What's the formula? Dividend what? My question is dividends of D sub 1 or D sub 4? 4. Next period, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so R minus G. What's the D sub 4? We already calculated.
249.
249. And what's the R? 8%. And what's the G? 4%. Growth in earnings, growth in dividends is same. Growth in earnings, growth in dividend, 4%. Oh, what's the stock price at the end of year 3?
62.25.
62.25.
Yes.
That's the at this time. At this point in time, stock price is that. Then how to calculate stock price today? Always the question is like this. What's the stock price today? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to write here. A piece of 0 equals what? What's the stock price today? Concept, always. Present value of all the future cash flows in the future. You expect this in the future. What about the first year? How much is the cash flow first year? First year. 0, right?
Yes.
Remember, we are doing what? Dividend discount model, right? Our cash flow is dividends, not anything else. Dividends. That's our cash flows. Not free cash flow. Yeah. That's we're going to talk about later. Yeah. Dividend is 0. What's the second period?
0.
0. What's the third period? 0. What's the fourth period? That, right? 62, 25, and what's the? We need to calculate present value, right?
1.
What's the present value? How to calculate present value? 1 plus. 1 plus. What's the R? Discount rate. 8%, right? 0.8. So what's the price today?
You're supposed to put it in here now.
Because it's for a 3 years.
3 years. Oh, yeah, 3 years, right? We need to discount to 1 to 3 years. Yeah, thank you very much. Don't make mistake. What's the price?
49.
49. 42? 42. Draw the concept map, then again, draw the timeline. But other textbook actually talk about only dividends. They don't provide this information, but this information is, this example is more realistic. So I like this question. My previous textbook actually do not give this kind of information, only information about dividend. You have a similar question as I said. Oh, actually, I printed out that my finance lab my previous semester. But you're gonna have this information. What time? It's time to go. Next time I'm gonna review together with this my finance lab question.
Which question?
My finance quiz question actually, chapter 7 quiz. But what is due date for chapter 7?
Sunday.
Sunday, this Sunday. So I want to try. Huh? Can you try? And then we can review together. Let's do that. That way. Try. You can do that.
Oh, I see.